pointed at what you want to talk about?
I believe it happened because it was the theme of their TEDx talk was very much in line with the story that I tell in my TEDx talk. And it also happened because I went after it, right? I could have just bought that ticket and sat down and sat in the audience that day. But I followed that framework of, I was curious, like, what if? What if I could speak on that stage? And I took one small step and sent an email.
See, now the audience is starting to get an indication of why I feel like this could be life-changing for a lot of people, just with that question, what if? Okay, just the simple question, what if? What if there is room for one more person? You know, even I, as much work as I have done, I wouldn't have done that. Not to tell you the truth, I wouldn't have done that. I would this at full. I would say, okay, next. So I'm saying, what if? So that is a very powerful way to get started. I want to ask you though, because it's difficult for most writers, most speakers, most trainers to take their ideal and slim it down to 18 minutes or less. What was that process like for you?
That was difficult, considering, again, the talk was about 8 weeks from when I was accepted to speak. And I know some people often have like 3 months, 4 months, even up to 6 months or a year to prepare their talk. I had 8 weeks. So at first, I didn't know like there was a format for a TEDx. So I just wrote my story. I wrote the story I wanted to tell. And then I did speak to a TEDx speaking coach and just went through the idea that and you've got the framework of what a TEDx needs to be. It has to be a through line. What's the idea worth spreading? Because that is what TEDx is all about. And there's a couple of things I got from that conversation. Number one is, what is my through line, right? Can't just be the story about my mom. And the second thing was the concept of if what you have to say doesn't impact the audience, then don't say it, right? The story, it might be your story, but this talk is not about you. It's about how you're going to impact the audience. So with those two pieces of feedback, I was able to go back and rewrite my talk so that it fit in 18 minutes and it provided value for the audience.
Were you nervous that day?
Oh my gosh, I couldn't believe how nervous I was. I mean, I'm a facilitator. I speak all the time in front of hundreds of people. But I think the nervousness came from, it was a personal story. It was live, recorded, and there were no prompters. It was, I had to memorize the whole thing and get on stage and just tell it word for word.
You know, the idea that you had to memorize it and tell it from the heart. And then you told some kind of a personal story, and we'll get into the story, but did that, do you think, added on to the tension of the day to share some personal information about you and your family?
Yes, because it's not how I grew up, right? We kind of kept things close to our vest, didn't really share too much about our family. This really was, I mentioned I do a lot of workshop facilitation, but I didn't share about myself in my work. So this was the first time I told the story publicly about my family, this personal story, and that definitely added to the nerves. And my mom was in the audience too, which was really nice. Yeah.
Yes. That's perfect. That's so perfect. So you've kind of already said this, but let me just put it out there so everybody can really get a handle on this. Tell us what's unique, powerful, maybe different about either your TEDx talk, your organization, or you personally. What's unique, powerful, different that the audience might need to know?
I think what is powerful about the work I do, my TEDx talk and the work I do, is that it's not rocket science, right? But what it is applying curiosity and creativity to all aspects of your life. And it's something that we all have access to. So it resonates with everybody.
Wonderful. I want to pull this apart right away because the talk was called What If? I think it's the life-changing power of curiosity and courage.
Correct.
Why did you pick that title?
A couple of reasons, because I do feel that when you follow your curiosity, ask what if, and take small steps, it's life-changing, right? In many different ways. As you can see, for me, following that framework, I got on a TEDx stage. And I've had so many opportunities after that. So just the reality that when you ask what if, you are creating possibilities for yourself, and those possibilities can be life-changing. how I came up with the format of the title is research. I just went and looked online and looked at most watched TEDx talks and read some titles and came up with what I had seen is that the ones that kind of have the questions and engage the audience had a lot of views.
Oh, okay. Wow. Research. Yeah,
yes.
This is powerful.
Not my strong point, but I did it for this.
You told some stories throughout your TEDx talk, and I want to pull those apart, but I want to pull apart one that, when you talked about it, it kind of struck me as a little bit unique and powerful. Would you mind resharing the story about Cracker Jacks?
About Cracker Jacks? Oh my goodness,
Yes.
I can remember them. So basically, I do share this story about how, oh my God, you got to remind me of that one, Cracker Jacks.
Yeah, well, you were able to lay out the person who did that and how he decided or she decided.
Oh yes. Okay, so this was this one I quoted, not quoted, but mentioned a book. Like about powerful questions. And there was, I don't remember the person's name at this point, but there was someone who came to the United States from Germany and, saw that the Americans had this obsession with popcorn and caramel, and peanuts. So they put those two things together and made Cracker Jacks, right? Just like this idea of two simple things. And that's what creativity is, just taking simple things that don't necessarily go together and creating something new.
Well, I like that you said simple things, making things simple. And you talked about this.
And clearly, I need to re-listen to my TEDx talk.
Yeah, well, no, because to me that hit me is like, okay, wait a minute, that's simple. It's three things that this gentleman said. Hey, people like this. What happens if I put them all in one bag? Now look at it. The reason why it kind of hit me is because I had a bag of Cracker Jacks before I flew out before I got on the plane last week. And I said, oh, wait a minute, here's my toy surprise in it. So I have my toy surprise sitting on my desk still, but it just hit me. Then I'm listening to yours, and I said, wait a minute, she said that Cracker Jacks. So I think that's a good story because it's kind of synthesizing information, the simple things. Right. And I like this idea when you're talking about it's a small thing. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like you're also, when you get into your TEDx, you're talking about this ideal of taking small steps to get things accomplished. Why small steps?
So small steps, and this was from experience and doing some research on it too, especially with one of my mentors, Dr. Robert Maurer, who wrote a book called Kaizen Muse, One Small Step Can Change Your Life. And the idea with small steps is that you can bypass your brain's natural instinct to stop you. For example, when I went to start my business, I had this idea like, this is what my business is going to look like in 5 years, right? I had this grand plan for it. But every time I would think in this grand plan, I would get anxious and my body would tighten and I wouldn't do anything, right? I would decide to rather than working on that business because it seems so grand, I'm just going to go and, take a walk or, watch Netflix or whatever it might be. Anything to keep me away from the fear of whatever that grand plan is. But by taking small steps, you're bypassing your brain, specifically the amygdala. You're bypassing the amygdala, which is your fight or flight, which triggers fight or flight. So you can bypass that by tiptoeing around it. And by taking one small step at a time, you are going to reach your goals faster than when you attempt giant leaps.
So it's a way for
consistency.
So it's a way for you to work around that. I call it the bear mind that wants to trap things inside and hibernate and not to let them get out. But it's a way to get around that, taking small steps. So you're fooling your own thought process, I think I heard you say?
That's right.
Great. So now when you're building things, well, let's go ahead and dissect your story about your mother. I think that was a very powerful story that most people don't really understand. And they can go and listen to the TED Talk to get the full story, but I want to pull it apart a little bit. When you said you were 2 years old when you made the move from Vietnam to the United States? Okay. It's kind of a off the subject type of question for you. What do you remember about the move? I mean, was it a culture shock for you?
I remember nothing. I mean, I was 2 years old. I don't think that's a time when you have memory, but even my sister who was 4, she didn't remember anything either because I think it was so traumatic. So my dad was a colonel in the South Vietnamese Air Force, and on April 29th, 1975, that's the day that we were told we needed to flee the country because the communists were coming down to the south and they were about to take over. So we had, in a matter of hours, we had to find a way to leave our country with the help of the U.S. Marines and the U.S. military. So we were able to escape. So I don't have memory of it. I do have a lot of stories that my parents have told us. And even though my sister says she doesn't have memories. Like I remember some of the games she would teach us as young children. She was the oldest one, and she would play games with us, like grab a pillowcase, stuff it with as many things as you can, and they'll hide under the kitchen table. Right? Like that's like who plays like that's not a normal childhood game.
Well, okay, I don't know if you'd say that's not normal or not, because me and my brother did some weird things too. But yeah, so that's interesting, because what I want to try to get to, the point was going to lead to this. You went not really against your parents, but you went against the tradition. Okay. You, for example, got on your bicycle and toured Vietnam. How did your parents feel about that, by the way?
That made them nervous. I mean, again, like my mom when I did that, my mom had been back. You have to remember, like when we fled Vietnam, it was like my dad would have been killed if we had stayed. So that's the Vietnam that they had remembered. My mom had visited Vietnam one time after that when I was in high school. And this was post-college that I decided I'm going to go back and travel up and down the coast of Vietnam on a bicycle. So, when I reflect back on what they thought about that, it's really kind of what they thought about a lot of things I did in my life, which was like, you're crazy, but we know we can't stop you.
Yeah. They figured it out finally.
Yes.
What did you learn from that?
It was such a beautiful trip. Again, it was, so much. The fact that I was finally in a place where I, at least physically, didn't look different, right? I wasn't the odd one out. So there was a sense of belonging there. But at the same time, there was a sense of, yes, I belong in terms of like, this is where I was born. I resemble everyone here. So there's a sense of not standing out. But when I tried to communicate with people and people found out I was living in America and I had been there since I was 2, then there was that sense of standing out, but in a way that I was very welcome, and people really wanted me to remember my home. I remember I was eating at a restaurant one day, and the waiter just simply said to me, "Just don't ever forget where you're from."
I think we hear that often through almost all the minority population in the United States. When we go back to the home area, we're told, hey, just don't forget where it all started from, where you were from. I think that's powerful. Did that statement affect how you're shaping your company? Did it affect your TEDx talk?
It certainly affected my TEDx talk. I really recognize, I come from a long heritage, a long history of survivors, of fighters, of people who were who persevere and are relentless. And my husband often calls me relentless, and and now I know where that comes from.
Right. Well, that's probably true. Probably you get a hold of something, you don't let it go till you get it.
Right.
This is probably a set of powerful questions. I want to ask you about a statement you also made in your TEDx that I found powerful. Be your own advocate before, during, and after your talk. So I kind of slashed the word talk, but be your own advocate before, doing, and after you get something accomplished. Tell us about that. So
I made that statement particularly when we were talking about advice on a TEDx talk. And I was not someone who grew up advocating for myself, and I had to learn how to do that. And it goes to, you never know until you ask, right? Even if the answer is no, if you want something, you have to ask for it. So I would say in the lens of my TEDx talk, advocating for myself by saying, here's what, just like what I did, like, I'd love to speak on your TEDx stage. Here's the talk, and I was accepted. And then in the communication, in terms of leading up to the TEDx talk, if I wasn't clear on something, asking, will I have an opportunity to stand on stage before we give the talk? Will I have an opportunity to be on, see myself on camera before, whatever it might be that you need. after the talk, also, like, I had no idea that, in the editing process, I could have a say in it. But my talk was edited. It was sent back to me. I wasn't satisfied with it. So I asked, can I have someone re-edit this? And the answer is yes.
Wow. Well, again, just so people can kind of know, you asked.
Yeah.
I don't think most of them would allow that. It's the way it is. It's the way it is. They edit it for time or for bad words. But otherwise, I think it's just the way it is. But now I know to ask. If I ever decide to do another one, I know to ask, hey, do I get editing rights at this? So that's good that you asked that. I think that's important that you learn how to advocate for yourself. Have you decided or thought about how this idea of advocating for yourself leads to a healthy person in all ways, but especially a healthy leader? Have you thought through that line?
So say that one more time, Glenn.
Okay, so I know I'm catching you by surprise, but when you think about advocating for yourself, have you thought about how that helps you be a better leader?
Absolutely. I think that a leader who can advocate for themselves allows, and I'll say this specifically in terms of like a leadership role. If I know how to advocate for myself, I think that does make me a more content human being, and it also allows me to be open to the people I'm leading to advocate for themselves.
Okay, great. So it allows you to be open to that. I want to ask you about another statement that you made, to go after the stage that you want to be on. Okay. I know you made that based upon a TED Talk, but doesn't that apply to the way you run your business, to go after the clients you want, to go after the things that you want to do?
Yes, I think the way you approach one area of life tends to be the way you approach other areas of your life. So the way I approach getting that TEDx talk is the way I approach, looking for clients, looking for collaborators for my business. Especially in the last year, we've been so much it's all been virtual. But I look back at the past year now and look at my connections I've made on LinkedIn. And I have so many people on there who I would call colleagues and friends from just simply reaching out, saying hello authentically, and making connections that way. Also with clients, if I have an idea for, I won't name the company, but it's a really big company. I just thought today, like, oh, they do so many, they have a robust internship program, and I do a creative workshop to onboard interns, and I'm going to find a way to reach out to them. So that's, and like I said before, I'm relentless. So, yes. I will find that until I reach out to them, because I think a lot of it is belief in what you do and the confidence in what you do. I know that my program, specifically this one, has been very effective for other internship programs to really get people to connect and gather and use creativity as a tool for communication and for collaboration. So I have no problem reaching out, and telling people what I do. And again, if the answer is yes, great. If the answer is no, I'll ask you in another year.
And that's a great way to start. Just lock into it and see if the answer is no, so what? So what? Who knows about this? Now, here's something else that you said, and I think it was in our correspondence, that lit a fire up under me. It's not about you. When you say that, tell us about what you mean.
Yes. And I love that when you ask me these questions, Glenn, that was all in the lens of the TEDx talk. But as you ask them now, it's really about life.